Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com. Today I've got my hands on a pretty wild car. This is the Lexus RCF Fuji Speedway Edition. So that means it's the lightweight, track-focused version of the RCF with the aggressive styling that we first really saw on the LFA supercar and then the LC500. It's still got that same naturally aspirated V8, but it's got carbon fiber everywhere to try and shave weight where possible. But all of that results in a $100,000 price tag for a Lexus RCF. I can fully admit I was ready to hate this car, but I'm surprised. I actually kind of like it. Up here, it's fun. But the question is it 6 figures worth of fun? Let's take it for a spin, and I'll show you the good, the bad, and the undeniably absurd about the Lexus RCF Fuji Speedway Edition. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thanks.
That man is mustachioed, and he bears a heavy load. He goes where he wants to go. That man is...
So you fire up that big V8, the seat scoots forward, snugging you into this cockpit, and it just sounds really good. It's a 5.0 liter naturally aspirated V8, just a throwback from a bygone era. Lexus bills it as the most powerful V8 in the lineup, and that's by a whopping 1 horsepower over the LC500. 572 horsepower, 395 pound-feet of torque. They say it'll do 0 to 60 in just a hair under 4 seconds, and I believe it. It's got sort of an old-fashioned gear selector too, that almost feels like you're changing gears for real. But of course, this is an 8-speed automatic car. No manual, pulling away. We're in regular mode, so there's a bunch of different drive modes that you can play with, which I always love. They're controlled by this dial here, as opposed to the LC500, which is like up here for whatever reason. So you've got Eco, which I normally drive in because it's the softest, the gentlest. And then when you come up into the canyons, you can pop it into Sport, which firms up the suspension noticeably, tightens up the steering a bit, improves the throttle response and the transmission shift points. And then if you really want to start getting wild, you can pop it over into manual mode and use the paddle shifters on the steering wheel. It's an 8-speed automatic, but it's not a dual clutch, so the shifts aren't lightning fast, but they're pretty good. And you can downshift and rev this big V8 up pretty high. It's got a 7,200 RPM redline, not bad, and the higher you go, the better it sounds, because it's got a titanium exhaust system, of course. We're trying to shave weight here. This thing weighs 4,781 pounds for a lightweight track coupe. But, you know, that's better than the base RCF, which comes in at closer to 4,000 pounds. Not exactly great for what you would call a lightweight sports coupe. So, in reality, this is the hardcore version of what's like a little bit of a Grand Tourer, just a mini LC500. Then again, when you really firm this thing up, it's almost too aggressive. I don't even like being in Sport Plus up here, because it's just prangy. It's so firm that all the little bumps come through, and it's unpleasant trying to put that power down. You can see it's like really bumping around all of a sudden. So I just keep it in, oh, that put us into eco mode. Now we're in normal sport, and we can cruise along. I'm in manual mode, revving it up medium high, but it handles pretty well. It doesn't feel like it weighs 3,781 pounds, that's for sure. And that's sort of a miracle of suspension technology. These days, these cars are getting bigger and bigger, but some of them manage not to feel like it. You give it a little gas, oh, and it just sounds really good. You've got a lot of push, and then coming into the corner, the brakes are really good. They're Brembo carbon ceramics, again, we're saving weight, but they've got a ton of bite. 4 piston calipers up front, 2 pistons at the rear, and they bring this thing to a stop real quick, which is nice because it weighs a lot. We're coming back to a common theme here. It's got Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires, and never before have I heard Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires squeal so loud as in this car. I've never even heard them squeal at all, but maybe that's because I'm not pushing it hard enough in my normal driving on other cars with PS4S tires. Either that or it's because this is probably the heaviest car I've ever driven with these tires. Now, the driving position is pretty good. It's a cockpit for sure. The design is similar to the LC500, but a little bit less fancy. You've got a little Alcantara thing going on, which I don't like. I wish it had a flat bottom steering wheel, right? Track toy, flat bottom steering wheel sounds correct. But the steering wheel is also not particularly adjustable. It's manually adjustable, we're saving weight, but it doesn't come to me close enough. It only comes to here, and I would want to be like up here if we were on the track, but then my knees would be all cramped. Oh, you can feel it get a little bit sideways there. It's got a traction control off button that I can push, and then if you're in Sport Plus and you push the traction control off button, it completely defeats the traction control, and you can really make this thing get squirrely. Because those Michelins at the back are only 275 wide, 255 wide at the front. You know, that sounds wide, but this is a heavy vehicle. So it's almost fun, and that's what I like about this car. It's just a lot of fun, and I'm surprised by that. I figured it would just be a boat, but when you firm everything up, it's very scalpel-like for such a heavy car. And there is something to be said for a heavier vehicle as sort of a learning tool, because you do get to feel that weight transfer. Even though it's staying pretty flat, you can feel it on the tires for sure. And in that vein, I kind of do want to take this thing on a track. Is it going to be blasting out the best lap times on earth? No, it just weighs too much. But it will be a good training tool, I think. And it sort of reminds me of driving the Hellcat Challengers at Radford Racing School. The Challengers really surprised me too, in the best way possible, in that they didn't feel super heavy, and they were a great training tool. Considering that it's got a big 5.0 liter V8 on the nose, it's a pretty impressive feat that Lexus has managed to allow it to have such good turn-in. And it sounds, oh, it just sounds really good. We'd have the windows down, of course, if I weren't filming, and then it sounds even better. Now, I drove the LC500 on these same roads, and it feels 100% like a Grand Tour. It's got the drive modes that you can play with, and you can sort of firm it up and make it more aggressive, and it's got paddle shifters, but it's so heavy, and it comes on much softer tires that are much less aggressive. I think the steering ratio is a little bit wider, and it's not what that car was built for. This one feels like it was made for canyon carving, even though it's a little counterintuitive. I do prefer the LC500's design, which is even closer to the LFA than this car, which is a little bit sort of bulbous, I would say, especially with the carbon fiber hood and the vent. It sort of all comes down in a little bit of a bird beak, and the design makes me wonder, who is Lexus really targeting with these cars? They're only going to build 50 for the 2022 model year, and they cost 6 figures. So it kind of looks as aggressive as a Supra, but it's got more power and a V8, but it costs way more. So it's not your Supra customer. And let's see, we're at $100,000. That's Porsche 911 territory. Think about a BMW M4 Competition. Sounds like a great car. Probably fairly similar in comparison to the performance of this vehicle. Starts at 80. Now, of course, you can't get an M4 Competition because they're sold out everywhere and the dealer markups are insane. And I wonder if that's actually going to help Lexus sell more of these. Are they all sold out? That's a question that I need to ask Lexus, but unfortunately I'm filming this on the 4th of July weekend, and I don't get to ask them any questions until after I give the car back. To try and cut almost 300 pounds from the RCF's curb weight, Lexus added the carbon fiber hood, carbon fiber roof, carbon fiber splitter, carbon fiber side skirts, carbon fiber rear diffuser. There's even carbon fiber on the armrests here in the cockpit. And as a cyclist who rides these roads on his road bike, I can admit the carbon fiber really does it to me. I just love carbon. You can see the weave. It's really beautiful. The weave on the door even has a little bit of blue tint to match that paint job, which is new for 2022. It's a matte paint job, but it's got a little bit of sparkle. It looks good in some lighting and not as good in others. It sort of looks like a wrap job when you first see it from far away, but then when you get up close, you get a little bit of that metallic flake, and it looks okay. In my opinion, they should have just gone for full carbon, but hey, that would have made this even more expensive. Pulling out here. Oh, yeah. It dings at you when you get to red line, but let's see if it'll bounce off the rev limiter. Ooh, nice. It gives that old ba 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 instead of just softening up. Now, it does have a G-force meter, which I kind of can't really look at. The gauges are a little small, and the G-force meter is pretty tiny, but it does keep track, so you can check on that later if you think that you're going real hard on the race course or up here in the canyons. It is a car where you can get well over 1G. I checked, and I think my highest number was 1.3, which is pretty good for a vehicle this large. And again, it's those Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires, which are always super impressive. See, you can hear that transmission shifting pretty quickly, but you can see there's that slight lag. It's just a normal transmission. It does pretty good for what it is. And when you're driving in town, the transmission does great. This is a very smooth car when you've got it in eco mode and you're just cruising in traffic, and that's sort of the LC500 TNA coming through. You could use this as a luxury vehicle as opposed to, say, a Cayman GT4, which might be a little prangy. But the GT4 is another car that's priced around the same as this Lexus and probably has a little bit more panache, a little bit more track capability, and is, without a doubt, more of a scalpel on roads like this. It doesn't have quite as much room. This technically is a 4-seater, although you can see those back seats are absolutely tiny. I don't even know if you could put a baby seat in there and feel comfortable. You'd have to move the front seat up a fair amount, I would imagine. Another way that Lexus trimmed weight is they put in a lightweight AC compressor, but I can attest that the AC in this car works pretty well. It does not have ventilated seats, which I love about the LC500, but that brings up, of course, the insane Lexus infotainment system. And this is just, it's so hilariously bad. Everyone knows about it by now. Lexus knows about it. They're phasing it out on all the new generations. But you've got this trackpad right here that you control the screen with. It's not a touch screen. It's got Apple CarPlay, but you can't control CarPlay with the touchpad. It's just insane. For example, sometimes if you're in the map, which I have going right now, and you want to do like your climate control or whatever, I'm not even going to do it because like I'm kind of focused on driving. But you can have to go through as many as 4 separate screens using the trackpad just to change the temperature. Now I understand where the design comes from. Everyone uses laptops these days, said an engineer at Lexus. Let's make the controls like a laptop with a trackpad. But how it got past that initial phase when the first person tested it while driving is absolutely mind-blowing. It is downright dangerous. So that's a major consideration in the era when you want to have your Waze going so you know where the cops are, and you want to have your music going from your iPhone, and you want to have wireless CarPlay, and you want to have a touch screen. There's a $100,000 car and you don't have a touch screen. It's just unfortunate, but it's something that will change. Will the RCF Fuji Speedway make it to another generation and get a real touchscreen? I have my doubts. This is sort of a peculiar car, and I don't know how much of a market actually exists for a sports car that costs this much, built by Lexus. Now, it does what it wants to do surprisingly well. But again, you know, you talk about the end of the gasoline era, and there are a number of brands coming out with impressive V8 sports cars these days. Will the new Chevy Corvette Z06 be under 100 grand? Probably not with markups, but there is another car that is surprisingly similar to this one for a lot less, and one that I would probably take in exchange, the Mustang Mach 1, which I drove on the track and is just so much fun. You can even get it with a manual 6-speed and a Hurst cue ball shifter. It sounds really good, it looks really good, the interior is really nice, and those start at more like 60 grand. The fact that I can even compare this $100,000 Lexus to a $60,000 Ford, not the greatest thing ever. Then again, if you like carbon fiber, you need the Lexus. And as much as I like the Mustang Mach 1, for the price of an RCF Fuji Speedway, you can get a full-on Shelby GT500 with 760 horsepower and the glorious sounds of a supercharged V8 and the adaptive suspension and massive brakes. So that's really more of the competitor to this car, which makes me all the more surprised. Now, I am surprised at how much I like this car, but I'm also surprised that Toyota and Lexus brought it back for 2022. Will it survive to another generation? I have my doubts. Only time will tell. It is a lot of fun, but is it the kind of budget car for the money, or are there really Lexus and Toyota fanboys who would get this on top of a highly modified Supra? I'm not sure, but I'm enjoying driving it nonetheless. Thanks for watching. Check out HotCars if you want to learn more about the RCF, and specifically the RCF Fuji Speedway. I hope you learned something watching this video, and as always, before you head out, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thanks.